Kia ora, tēnā karahuihui mai rā tātou katoa ki tēnei hui ngā kōrero, ki tēnei hui ngā wānanga, kāmatu, ki tēnei tino tangata. He hoa nōku, engari he tino toa i roto i wāna mahi katoa. Ana, ko whai wāhi mai Kereama Wright ki te kōrero kia mātou. Ana tonu te hōtaka nei ko tapa ki tētahi ingoa. Ana, mana tonu e whakapare ki tēnei wahanga o tāua.
Tēnā koe heni o tira, tēnā koutou i ngā ino te Arawa e whakarongo mai ana, e mātaki mai ana. Ko Kereama Wright, tēnei e kōrero atu nei kia koutou, he uri ahau no te Arawa waka, Ngāti Rangitihi, Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako, tētahi waiwai oku no roto mai o Taranaki, no ngā rua hinerangi i te tahatonga o Taranaki. Engari i pakekea au i roto rua nei, i tuake nei, i te kura kaupapa Māori o Ruamata, i ngā whenua o Matawera, Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako koira, te kura i mori i a mātou ko tōku whānau, i a mātou e tamariki ana. Kamutu koi nei hoki te whenua, e noho nei tātou i runga i ngā whenua i whānau mai ai, o tira i whakapakekehia mai ai tō mātou kuia, te māmau taku pāpā, i kā ramuramu nei. He pākainga i ona wā, i mua i te hanganga mai o te hea taunga wakarererangi nei. Ka turakina tērā pākainga, engari e mihi ana kia koutou o tira, kia koe heni i tēnei kaupapa. E kia nei ko te paipai poto, ne?
Ai, ko te paipai poto, te ingoa ko tukuna ki tēnei kaupapa. Ko te kaupapa nei, he kaupapa whakanui, ia tātou anō, kamutu, ngā uri o te Arawa, mai make tū ki Tongariro. Engari, he whakatēnā i ngā whakaro, he whakaoreore. Ia tātou, kia matāra, engari kia whai akoranga i ngā kōrero tuku iho. Engari ko ngā kōrero o nāi anei tonu. Hei oranga mō ngā uri o nāi anei, me ngā uri ngā whakareanga te hara mai nei. Nā reira, he mihi nui tēnei kia koe i runga no i te mātotoru, i te hohonu, i te rētōtanga, o ngā mōhioranga ko whangaia, kia koe kamutu. E mau nei a koe i roto i o mahinga katoa o tēnei au. You don't really need introduction, but I do want you to kind of explain to those who do not know who you are, what you do, and where you are in your life right now.
Kia ora, Heni. My name's Kereama Wright, for those of you who don't know. My parents are Renee Wright and Rawiri Wright. And on my father's side, his mother is Molly Wright, and she was born at Karamuramu here, which is at the northern end of the Rotorua airport. So she was born here when there was no airport, and there was a pā here, there were ngāwhā here at Karamuramu, and she was born next to the ngāwhā. Over the years, of course, through the Public Works Act, the land was taken, the ngāwhā were covered up, the pā was destroyed, and the airport was constructed and made, and where we see it today. So that's on my father's side. Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako, Pikirangi Marae as well. And on my mother's side, we grew up primarily as Ngāti Rangitihi. So those of you, or our whānau and my friends who know me, I've been a staunch Ngāti Rangitihi growing up in the Te Arawa games and everything else, because us as Te Arawa, we tend to prioritise or favour te ure tārewa. Te ure tāne, and so that's our kuraua Rauriti Mokonui Arangi. That's my mother's great-grandfather, my mother's great-grandfather. And so he's from Ngāti Rangitihi. He was a leader in Ngāti Rangitihi and in Te Arawa in this time. And so we grew up as Ngāti Rangitihi. Everything that we did was Ngāti Rangitihi. My kuia had my mother's mother, had her tangihanga at Rangiao here in Ngāti Rangitihi, in Matata there, for those of you who don't know. And all of her siblings are buried up there. Auntie Kathy Jew's mother, Kura, they're buried up at Awakapunga in Matata, because, we grew up primarily as Ngāti Rangitihi. But we are Ngāti Whakaue, Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako as well, Ngāti Pikiao through our tupuna kuia Tikawe, and yeah, so I don't want to, divulge too much about that. But also Ngāti Whakaue, our connection here to Ngāti Whakaue, which is through our tupuna kuia, Te Aoerere or Te Aorere Mātene, who married Rauriti Mokonui-Arangi, and she lived here on Mokoia Island, actually. Her and her whānau, her mother is buried on Mokoia Island right now. She was one of the last kuia to be buried on Mokoia Island. But for me, in my immediate whānau, we're kind of just, rekindling that connection to Ngāti Whakaue, or even though our karaua, tupuna karaua Rauriti Mokonui-Arangi is buried in front of Saint Faith's. So we've kind of, it's not a migration, it's kind of just restoking that fire. I can say we're proud to be from Ngāti Rangitihi, Te Arawa, Ngāti Te Ranginuara also, where Te Aoerere's father is from, Mātene Te Huaki, yes, father. And so, that's a little bit about me.
Well, it's a real privilege for you to share your whakapapa connections kei taku hua. Kei patoa mai o tāua hoa reo Māori, ia tāua tāte mea tupu mai māua ko Kereama I raro I tēnei mea te reo Māori. Nā reo ko te reo Māori, tōna tikanga me kawe I ngā wā katoa, I ngā wāhi katoa, hakua here ai tāua, e Māori ai tō tātou ao. Hoi no, ko te take o wēnei momo kōrero, the purpose of these podcasts is to help inspire those who are Te Arawa and are wanting to learn from those who are real active in the Te Arawa space, but also in Te Ao Māori and how they apply some of those principles into their everyday lives, and then how they draw upon those sorts of principles to drive them into striving for excellence in whatever space or whatever mahi they're doing. So he tino honore tēnei ki te whakarongo I a koe mea o kōrero kei taku huanga. I runga no I te mōhio, ko wēnei whakapaparanga, ko tēnei momo tirohanga ki te ao, me uaua ka kitea, ka rangona. Nā reira, he tino taonga wēnei kōrero, me taku mihi ki a koe ko haramai. Me te tūmanako, ka whakautu I ngā pātai, I runga no I te hiehia, kia whai māramatanga te katoa, kaua ko te toko iti. So, yeah, I've got some, I wouldn't say they're big questions, but they're probably conversations that we don't normally have in everyday public spaces.
They're difficult questions for me to answer, yes.
And they're based around identity, a sense of identity, sense of connectivity. How do you find your place in the world? How do you put a stake in the ground and claim that space and be comfortable in doing that with regards to your teachings, your learnings, tikanga kawa, and all of these sorts of things. I know that this is quite a broad subject, but I'm going to get straight into it and talk about the state of Te Arawa. Because Kereama is one of the... he's probably interviewed the most people. He's got a sense of where everybody is at with regards to identity and Te Arawa in their own identity. So how o whakaro, what are your thoughts around where Te Arawa are at in terms of their identity?
Well, hei, tīmatanga kōrero māku. E ai ki te kōrero ne, ki te kaha te whānau, ka kaha te hapu, ki te kaha te hapu, ka kaha te iwi. If the whānau is strong, then the hapu will be strong. If the hapu is strong, then the iwi will be strong. So I'll just start with my whānau and then take the long way to coming to the answer of your question. I was born in Otaki. My parents at that time were still kind of on the Reo Māori journey, or hadn't quite started their Reo Māori journey. Although they knew that they were Te Arawa, and they knew that they belonged here and had come here for tangihanga and stuff, there was a kind of a light bulb moment for my mum and dad where they decided, shit, we need to learn Te Reo Māori. And so this was when I was less than 1 year old. So that was 34 years ago, 33 years ago. Young. And so at that moment they decided, because they knew that in order for us to prosper as a whānau and to contribute to our iwi, we need to go and learn te reo Māori. And so mum and dad did that. They went to He Kāinga Mō Te Reo, did the hard, intensive 1-year course, along with some other whanaunga. They came, they heard Auntie Cathy was starting a kura kaupapa Māori here at Uanuku Kōpako, and they wanted to come and help grow that, because they had seen what the mainstream schooling system had done to our people, and therefore ko te ara kaupapa Māori, ko te kura kaupapa Māori, te rongoa, no reira e takahi ai rau i tērā ara. For them to take that path, they needed to learn te reo Māori and be able to pass that down to their kids. So they did that, and because they knew that not only by learning te reo Māori are you decolonising your tongue, but it's a window into the world of your ancestors, and so I will be forever grateful and indebted to my parents for taking that big bold step, because they are some of, a few of only the immediate whānau that took that step, and identified the need for that, to be able to contribute positively and meaningfully to the fabric of Te Arawa. So it was a decision for their whānau, but also it was a decision for the future of our iwi. And so that's, I bring that up because that's kind of the foundation for where the thinking and what I do now as a broadcaster, as a father, as a teacher of some sorts as well. So what was your question?
I wanted to...
What's the state of Te
Arawa
at the moment? So growing up back in those days, Te Arawa was, we moved as one. Back when we were kids, Te Arawa moved as one. There were those leaders, there are the Hamu Mitchells, the Irirangi Takiawas, the Hapi Winiatas, the Kunikunis, the Te Pōkihas, what they said went. That was the fabric of Te Arawa. We were a very patriarchal iwi, traditionally. And
yeah, let's break that down a bit, because, people try to make sense of what works for each iwi, and for Te Arawa, the patriarchal system was a system that was implemented. And I think
patriarchal system, that's probably a modern term or a colonised term for it.
And ki te whai whakaro ki te tarahiti. So the trust board was established 100 years ago. Yes. They're all male. Male. Obviously, only the Crown would deal with male. Yeah,
and I think the structure of Te Iwi Māori was the male lineage would be higher. Therefore, higher positions in society. Although, our wahine, knowing full well that our wahine, and I think it was, for me, I actually think it was a protection mechanism to protect our wahine, because they were bearing our future. Koera te take ka noho ko ngā tāne ki te pae o mua, i runga i te marae, nā runga i ngā whaiwhai a, i rere haere i e rā wā, ko tā ngā tāne he tā wharau i ngā wahine.
Te iwi whawhai, te iwi Māori i e rā wā.
I e rā wā, i te ora tonu ngā magic, ngā black magic o e rā wā.
Me ngā mahi a tinana.
Koea. So that's why... all of those tikanga, and I think that's why naturally the tāne were the leaders of the iwi.
Protectors is probably one way of looking at it. So, with regards to this pātau, and there'll be so many answers to it, and I know that you're only one person who can provide an answer, and I think that's for all of us to be mindful that he tangata kotahi a Kereama, haere te mea ko wana whakautu, te katoa o ngā whakautu. Engari, e whai mārama ai tanga ai tātou katoa and make sense of the way that Te Arawa sits and how it works. Do you think there are more than just one way of how Te Arawa works? Oh,
yeah, actually I've just remembered where I was going with it. So back then when we were growing up, Te Arawa moved as one, they'd go to a tangihanga, they'd go to the koronehana, and they'd go as Te Arawa. Te Arawa whānui would go, Ngāti Pikia, Ngāti Rangiwiwihi, Ngāti Whakaue, ka haere a iwi nei. Nowadays it's changed. You know, it's changed.
Hapu
Ko hoki
rangatiratanga.
anō ki te rangatiratanga te mana o ngā hapu. Nowadays, Ngāti Whakau will go to the tangihanga on there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Tuhaurangi will go, Ngāti Pikia will go, and Ngāti Rangi will, you know, in different iwi or hapu will go at different times. So it's definitely changed in the last 30 years. I think it's fragmentation. Aha koa e whakaia anau kia hoki tātou kia whai mana i a hapu. That's from my observation. Te Arawa, the fabric of Te Arawa has been split, and kua tua ke ia, well, kia auna he iwi you know, he iwi a Ngāti Whakau, he iwi a Ngāti Pikiao. Ka tua ke ia iwi.
Ko whanake, eh?
Ko whanake, koe rā te āhuatanga o te ao Māori whānui I tēnei wānei, but that's an observation. I think, you know, there are pros and cons to that. Definitely, I think hopefully there will be a time where, you know, we can go as Te Arawa, and there are times where we go as our hapu. So, you know, we go into kaupapa in Te Arawa, and ka haere koe hei Ngāti Rangi Wewehi, hei Ngāti Whakau, hei Ngāti Pikiao. Engari ka putāna, ka haere a iwi. And I think we're kind of still on the journey to mastering that at the moment. You know, we're fragmented, and we don't necessarily have the same quality of leadership that we had then, or definitely in our males. We do have it in our females, with the likes of Karen Verkoma. Engari koe rā tāku e ki tēnei wānei, I te taurua mano rua te kaumātoru, kua wehe haere a Te Arawa, kāre I te tino haere ngātahi, kāre I te tapatahi ngā whakaaro, and the Te Matatini Pōhiri was a great example of that, where, you know, there was a little bit of hoo-ha at the start before the Pōhiri. Eventually we kind of ironed out our creases, and then we get to the Pōhiri and shit hits the fan again. You know, that's because there's no leadership. Well, there's conflicting leadership is what I'll say.
Yeah, when we're looking at leadership, anywhere we are, ko tētahi whakaaro no hoki, me maia te tangata e puta ai he tino rangatira. And in Te Arawa, there are so many leaders in the spaces that they are in that it's hard to just choose one leader, and we're seeing that across the board. When I'm thinking of the legacy of just this entity, and as we celebrate the 100 years of the Te Arawa Trust Board, and then its reform into the post-treaty settlement entity now called Te Arawa Lakes Trust. The board is made up of 3 tupuna and they're broken up into 3 sections.
Thank you, Ms. Saro, on that.
Well, that's why we've got you in here, so that you can help those who are trying to gain a connection or have engagement into this sort of a system. How does this work?
Yeah.
Māori leadership, Te Arawa leadership, you've been talking about exemplars, and I think the traditional one leader is obviously not working as it should, but then sometimes having a team of leaders.
Yeah, well, it's definitely changed. Like, we don't have the same leaders that have had everything. Our leaders back then were, they were politicians, they were tohunga, they had te reo Māori, they were parents as well. Well, some of them were horrible to kids, actually, by the way. But they had everything. Whereas nowadays, you know, that skill set has been shared and distributed, and we don't have, you know, a leader that has te reo Māori, that has the business acumen, that has the social
Maybe that's a hard
foresight.
thing to ask of any individual.
Well, I mean, definitely. But I think, you know, if we as a iwi plan it, then we will get it. If we plan it and you know, pick people to mould, then we can reach those heights that we once did.
I want to talk about the value of e hare te mea e ratana hoki tēnei momo kupupa, mātauranga Māori, whakaaro Māori, tirohanga Māori, te herenga ki o tātai whakapapa, he rere ke tērā ao ki te awen honei tātou inaine, he ranunga ao Pākehā, tenuinga Kotāmi, tenuinga o wā mātou whakaaro katoa, ki te whakaaro a iwi tātou. E ni wetahi wā he uaua ki te whakanuku I wēnā momo whakaro, kia pērā rawa ki ngā whakaro, ōmua ki ngā whakaro ngā mātua, ngā tupuna. So shifting the attitudes, and I actually don't really like this kupu either, decolonisation. Engari, kei te ahua o waku whakaro, ngā momo kōrero haramaine.
Yeah.
Shifting one's thinking from here to being more active in that way of thinking, does it add value?
Well, it definitely adds value. Definitely adds value, and I think the trick is finding the balance. It's a balancing act, because we need to be utilising, and we've seen with the rise of matariki and tarangi mātāmua and rereata mākiha and
te matatini. Just
te
last week
matatini.
with you and your huro.
There needs to be a balance so that we can utilise the fruits of mātauranga Māori, because with mātauranga Māori comes te tiaki, te taiao, and all of what comes with that. But also I appreciate the need for the growing the economy and growing the wealth of the iwi. But the trick is having a balance. Kia kore tētahi e noho tuakana ki tētahi. Engari kia noho tauaro, rāua kia rāua. Kia haere ngātahi, kia ōrua te haere o te taha mātauranga Māori, te reo Māori. I think, Te Arawa, current state of Te Arawa at the moment, I believe we undervalue the mana and the importance of te reo Māori. And that's been like that for... It's been a steady decline over the last 30 years. And although we've got, 4 or 5 kura kaupapa Māori,
E rongo tonu ana.
E rongo tonu ana I te whakaaro rua o te iwi o Te Arawa ki te reo Māori. And if you have a look at many of our leaders of our trusts, te nuinga he kōrero Pākehā, te nuinga kāre I a rātou te reo Māori. And yeah, I think as an iwi, we need to make a conscious decision. We have to have a strategy to grow te reo Māori. You look at Ngāti Kahungunu and you look at Ngai Tahu, I think it's because they've experienced greater loss. Therefore,
ngā iwi o Raukawa.
O Raukawa, ko tahi mano, there's whakatupuranga rua mano. But I think as an iwi, we need to make a conscious decision to grow our te reo Māori capacity. We just, at the moment, kei runga I o tātou pokohiwi ngā whānau rua nei, te oranga tonutanga o te reo Māori, engari a iwi nei, I think Te Arawa, and I hope you put this in, Te Arawa values the mana and the opportunity that comes with te reo Māori.
I'll just let you know now that this is shot as live and everything that's been said will go. Hoi no mo te hunga e whakarongo tonu mai ana. Kereama does raise a big point. Investment, resource, and valuing that one key thing. Tāte mea, all the research and the evidence suggests that if you have your reo, you will be wealthy. I think that was the last one. And then it's obviously it's not about money, but it's about tuakiritanga. It's about being able to stand proud as Māori and as Te Arawa. And for me, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. For those of you who don't know, I'm a journalist and I've been telling stories for the last 15 years, and I'm absolutely passionate about it. And there's a lot to be gained by telling our stories. Engari ki te ngaro tō tātou reo. Kare kangaro ngā kōrero. And so I hope, and I really hope that over the next 10 years, ka piki te tini o ngā whānau e hia kai ana, ki te whakatoi te reo Māori, te tuakiritanga Māori o tira Te Arawa, ki a tātou tamariki. He pai tēnā momo kōrero me tēnā momo kāro tāte mea. Ahea koe ka uru ki ngā tūranga tarahiti, ahea tonu rawa koe ka...
Well, that's the problem with kapaka is you can't go to the AGMs.
Well, congratulations. First and foremost, for those who didn't watch them too, koenei, te kaihaka o Ngāti Whakauwe I tukuna te tihate kia Scotty Morrison. And you're right, we need to change the way that we work and the way that because kapahaka will fall on the weekends. And so if you've got an AGM on the weekend, all know in Te Arawa, kapahaka always comes first.
Oh, Ngāti Rangiti, we get like 10 people at the hui. you know. And so I think definitely as iwi, all of our trusts need to innovate their plans so that it suits the fabric of the iwi. Otherwise, we're going to get minimal input. And there's a lot, especially in our generation, there's a lot to contribute, You know, there's a lot of pukinga in all of our reanga, but everyone just leads such busy lives. So, koe rā noi ho tāku, ko tai te wāpea ki a ta whakarautaki hia, e rā momo tarati. But, you know, there are other ways to contribute. You don't have to be on the trust, or you don't have to be the chairman to be contributing to your iwi. And I feel like by being a great father and by making sure my kids are well and know te reo, their reo and their stories and participating in their sports or whatever, then I'm doing my part as a member of Te Arawa.
Yeah, ka kōrero revitalisation. Tā te mea, pēnā ko tupuku I roto I ngā kura kaupapa Māori, ko tupuku I raro I ngā whakamarumaru reo. Ko te haipapa nui kei runga I a koe, ko te tuku e nā momo mātauranga ki ngā whānau, ki ngā wāhi e noho nei koe. Ara, koe te take o tēnei momo hōtaka, he tuku I te maia, he whakatēnā I te kaha, kia kōrero ki wā tātou uri. Hakua te iti o tō reo, hakua te iti o ngā pukenga kātāia.
You know, we're the products of parents who identified the need to bring and raise their children in te reo Māori. And my parents couldn't speak, you know, my aunties and uncles couldn't speak, but they wanted it and they went and got it. You know, despite the little reo that they had, they saw the foresight, they had the foresight, they saw what will come of it. Nō reira, koe rā tāku ki te hunga hia kai ana, you know, there's so many avenues now for you to go and learn te reo Māori. I think the environment is a lot more welcoming too now. So yeah,
because I would imagine that as a first time kura kid, the amount of people that were looking at you just while you're going on the bus.
Even my parents' siblings, my father's siblings, and some of the whanaunga, kind of still never understood why they made that decision, you know, why they would bring their children up entirely in te reo Māori, not speaking English to them. Some others would class that as a form of abuse to children, for not allowing them to speak English. Engari, kia au nei, he āhuatanga tērā o te ātete ki te karauna, o te ātete ki te Pākehā. I mean, I know that it's not easy, and I appreciate that it's not easy, but all I can say is, yeah, kia kaha, because the benefits for your whānau, for your uri, for your for the next generation are huge.
Yeah, obviously encouraging and inspiring those, because you've worked in journalism for a very long time now, and you've seen the bad stories, and obviously one of the solutions to that is having te reo, but when you're out there in the community or out there with the whānau, what is it that you do to kind of encourage them to hoki mai? Because it does take a bit of leap of hope and faith and courage to kind of jump on this journey.
Oh, well, ko tāku nui ho ka whakaaro ki ngā uri ni. Koe nei te oranga o tō tātou iwi. Koe nei te oranga o ā tātou kōrero. He roto I ngā kōrero ko ngā hitori. Kei roto I ngā kōrero ko ngā kōrero mō te whenua, tō tātou hononga ki te whenua, and, you know, treaty breaches aren't a thing of the past. Treaty breaches are going to happen today and they're going to happen tomorrow, so in order for us to be able to fight the Crown on these breaches, and there'll be new breaches in 2050 and so on, we need to know our kōrero. We need to be able to tell our stories. We need to understand our stories in the depth of all of that history. Otherwise, we will lose our land and we will lose our people.
I do want to talk about this. I know that I'm going over a bit of time, but I think it's important to talk about storytelling, kōrero pūrākau, but making them relevant, and then carrying those stories down to our tamariki mokopuna so that the legacy continues. But what are different ways? And you're a storyteller. Some are more traditional storytellers, but sometimes it doesn't resonate with our tamariki mokopuna. So what are the methods and the ways of passing down Our kōrero tuku iho.
Ai, e ora tonu ai a tātou kōrero me tomo e tātou te ao hou. So, ko te huarahi tuku i ngā kōrero i ngā rā o mua, ko te tuku a waha, ko te tuku mā ngā whakairo. So that was our TV and our internet of the past, all re our whakairo. And they held our stories, they held the history, they held the kōrero of the tūpuna, of the different pakanga, of the different tūtohi whenua. And then we get, radio and television, so we have audio, clips, we have video, we have archives, and now we have the metaverse. Now we have te ao tukupu, we have te ao matihiko, and there are whole worlds being built in the metaverse. And so I definitely think that we as Māori, we need to head that way as well. And even further, we need to develop our own tikanga and our own kawa so that Māori will survive in the metaverse. And I know George will be resonating with this kōrero because that's his world. But if we don't, we will get left behind, and someone else will create a Māori world in the metaverse.
It's that adapting.
Well, me hari ko te whakamaori i te ao whānui, and ko te metaverse, kei reira wā tātou tamariki e tākoroa nei te Roblox. We need to make sure that that's a safe space, and there will be a marae in the sky as the kōrero goes. But it needs to have a foundation of tikanga and kawa and te reo Māori, so that no matter where our kids go, they will see their world and they will feel comfortable in it.
Hei whakamatu ake pia he tēnei wahanga. I te hihia kia kōrero pia koe i tētahi kōrero tuku iho o te Arawa. Ana koera te kōrero i arahi mai koe kia eke ai koe ki ngā taumata koe kengia. Nā reira, heha ke tēnā, nā heha o akoranga iwe nā momo kōrero me te whakauru i tērā akoranga ki omahi o iara o iara.
O he rahi ngā kōrero engari i te mea i pakake au he Ngāti Rangitihi me tiki ake au te kōrero mō rangitihi whakahirahira te upoko i tā kaia ki te akatea. I te wā i paua te upoko o rangitihi, ka hinga ia ki raro, ko tana pōtiki, te hana pōtiki ke ko apu moana tērā, ka tākai tōna upoko. So, in that story, that's a story of resilience, that's a story of never giving up, that's a story also of trusting your children, trusting the next generation, and empowering them to be leaders, because that's the future. And through that action, ka ora tonua rangitihi, ka ora tonua āpu moana, o tira te Arawa, ka tōia te kauai o mātua tupuna kiuta. Nō reira koera tāku, and if you have a look at the stats that Te Arawa Lakes Trust will have, most of our iwi are under 30. So it's time for Te Arawa to, just let go of some of their power. And I'm not saying give it to me, or Mataia or Heni, but I'm saying we need to be utilising our next generation better and creating better pathways for our tamariki.
Pai e wena whakaaro, kamatu, wena kōrero. I know that you've just said like one solution, but hei whakamatu ake anō iwi nei kōrero. Where do you see, or where are your aspirations for Te Arawa in 100 years, and how can we achieve that?
Well, definitely for me, and I believe it's going to happen in our generation, is unity. Te kotahitanga o ngā iwi o Te Arawa, koera tētahi mea nui. 100% fluency in te reo Māori, tikanga and business would be great in 100 years. I've got 100% on my whānau at the moment, and if we all have that as a goal, maybe in 100 years or
maybe closer,
then it's definitely achievable. But I'm not saying that that's the be all end all, but we can have that, and we can have all of our kids who are fluent in technology and business and world leaders, but also leaders in their culture and their reo. But I mean, survival, ko te mea nui, ka ora tonu. Ka tino rereke te ao I roto I te kotahi rautau, you're going to have a World War III in the next 5 years.
Well, kei te tuki ki ngā atua I te wane.
Well, ki ngā atua. Engari, ko te oranga o te iwi. Me he mea ka ora tonu te iwi o Te Arawa I roto I te kotahi rautau, ka tino hariko au. Ki aku uri.
Tino. Awa, tēnā koe iwe nā momo kōrero. Kia ora.
Ngami.